I want to start by looking forward to Tuesday. President Trump is going to speak to world leaders, his first ever UN General Assembly meeting. Now, during his campaign, he had some pretty harsh criticism for the UN. Listen to what he told AIPAC last year.
The utter weakness and incompetence of the United Nations. The United Nations is not a friend of democracy. It's not a friend to freedom. It's not a friend even to the United States of America, where, as you know, it has its home. And it surely is not a friend to Israel.
Will the president stick by his America First message when he appears before the UN this coming week?
Well, I think you have to look at the fact that what he said at the time was accurate. I mean, I think we saw United Nations where the United States was giving over 25% of the funding and was being utterly disrespected, a United Nations that was bashing Israel every chance they get, a United Nations that talked a lot but didn't have a lot of action. And now we can say it is a new day at the UN. What you are now seeing is the Israel bashing has become more balanced. You've got United Nations that's action-oriented. We've passed 2 resolutions on North Korea just in the last month. And you also have a United Nations that is totally moving towards reform. You have a Secretary General who's come out with a massive reform package. We said that we needed to get value for our dollar, and what we're finding is the international community is right there with us in support of reform. So it is a new day at the UN. I think that the pleas that he made in terms of trying to see change at the United Nations have been heard, and I think what we'll do is see him respond to that come on Tuesday.
Let's talk about North Korea. The UN, as you well know, voted 15-0 on Monday to impose a new set of sanctions on North Korea. You said this will cut deep, but the president is not so sure. Listen to what he said this week.
We think it's just another very small step, not a big deal. I don't know if it has any impact, but certainly it was nice to get a 15-0 vote. But those sanctions are nothing compared to what ultimately will have to happen.
So, Ambassador Haley, what is the administration's position? Are the North Korea sanctions something that will cut deep or not a big deal?
Well, I think, the facts are the facts. So you look at it from the first sanctions bill that was the largest ever that we had done to North Korea was $1 billion and was one that really was a punch in the gut to North Korea. This one, which we passed in a week, was $1.3 billion. And that didn't count the reduction of 30% of the oil, which was made up of 55% reducing their diesel, oil, and their gasoline that they use to move the missiles, the trucks that go and move all of the equipment. So you take that with the elimination of joint ventures, the laborers, which we consider modern day slavery, all taken away. You look at all of those things that total 90% of North Korea's trade is being cut off. So we have economically strangled North Korea at this point, and they have said as much. I think what the president's saying is, look, we've done all this, but we can do a whole lot more. And
but just to be clear, what you just described, you don't agree that that's not a big deal?
Oh, I think everybody in the international community sees what a big deal it is. But also we know the importance is enforcement. And North Korea is already starting to feel the pinch. It's the reason you see them reacting the way they are. But I think this has not only been a kick to North Korea, this was a real hit to China. They had to take a real hit when it comes to the fact that they do 90% of trade with North Korea. That's been reduced on their end, too. So a lot of people feeling this, a lot of countries feeling this. But the most important thing, 15-0, united, strong, and North Korea has pretty much been cut off from the world.
The president said last month that North Korea would face fire and fury if it continues to threaten the U.S. and its allies. Well, since the president said that, North Korea has really done nothing but threaten the U.S. and its allies. North Korea threatened Guam. North Korea fired 2 missiles over Japan and tested a hydrogen bomb. So was the president's fire and fury remark an empty threat?
It was not an empty threat. What we were doing was being responsible. Where North Korea is being irresponsible and reckless, we were being responsible by trying to use every diplomatic possibility that we could possibly do. We've pretty much exhausted all the things that we could do at the Security Council at this point. Now, I said yesterday, I'm perfectly happy kicking this over to General Mattis because he has plenty of military options. So I think that the fire and fury, while he said this is what we can do to North Korea, we wanted to be responsible and go through all diplomatic means to get their attention first. If that doesn't work, General Mattis will take care of it.
Well, by saying General Mattis will take care of it, you're talking about the Pentagon and you're talking about a military option. Is that what fire and fury meant?
You have to ask the president what fire and fury meant, but I think we all know that basically if North Korea keeps on with this reckless behavior, if the United States has to defend itself or defend its allies in any way, North Korea will be destroyed. And we all know that. And none of us want that. None of us want war. But we also have to look at the fact that you are dealing with someone who is being reckless, irresponsible, and is continuing to give threats not only to the United States, but to all of their allies. So something is going to have to be done. We're trying every other possibility that we have, but there's a whole lot of military options on the table.
Ambassador Haley, stick around. There's a lot more to talk to you about, including the president's tweets and whether they make her job harder. And we're back with U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley. Ambassador Haley, let's talk about the latest terror attack in London, the fifth attack in Great Britain this year. President Trump responded to the attack with a tweet, and here's what he said. He said, "Another attack in London by loser terrorists. These are sick and demented people who were in the sights of Scotland Yard, must be proactive." As you saw, British Prime Minister Theresa May, she scolded the president for his response, saying it is never helpful for anybody to speculate about an ongoing investigation. We know that British intelligence is reluctant to share information lately with the U.S. because of President Trump's conduct. Do tweets like this make it harder for people like you to work with allies around the world on important issues?
Well, I think that you have to understand that the president can communicate in any form that he wishes. And if he uses Twitter, I think what you saw was a reaction to the fact that this is terrible and we cannot let terrorist attacks become part of our normal day. And when you see the number of these, it makes the president more and more assured that he has to do everything he can to keep Americans safe. And so he was concerned for the UK. He's concerned for the terrorist attacks that keep happening all over Europe. And he wanted to make sure that he had their back and that he was showing strength. And so I think as they move forward, certainly we're always going to be their allies. We're always going to have their back. But we have to be very careful. We cannot allow terrorist attacks to be a part of our everyday life.
Do you wish that the president was more careful in suggesting information about the investigation that is ongoing? Obviously, the British Prime Minister wished he was.
Well, look, the president would not want to do any harm to the investigation. Let's be clear. So if he goes out and he gets emotional and passionate about the fact that he's upset at what happened in the UK, I mean, of course, that's what he put out there. But there was no ill intent with that. I think it was the fact that he was just very concerned and very disturbed that these terrorist attacks keep happening in Great Britain.
Ambassador Haley, I want to ask you about immigration. President Trump recently rescinded DACA, which is the Obama-era program that protects undocumented immigrants brought to the U.S. as children. And President Trump wants a legislative solution. Well, Senator Lindsey Graham, senior senator from your home state of South Carolina, is the co-author of what's known as the DREAM Act, and it would offer these young people a path to citizenship. Do you believe that Dreamers should get not just the right to stay in the U.S., but an actual path to citizenship?
Well, first of all, I think that we have to remember that we all feel for dreamers. We all feel for those that came here or were brought here without their willingness or without their understanding that this was going to happen. So we all have a heavy heart for that. But I also think we have to remember that the United States is a country of laws, and we have to always follow those laws. And I think what you're seeing is the president is trying to work with Congress on what is a very difficult situation. There is no easy answer when it comes to things like this. And I think the fact that they're having the back and forth, the fact that they're talking about it, I think is important. And I think at the end there will be a resolution that they come together with on this as they go forward.
Ambassador Haley, before I let you go, I want to ask about a report on CNN.com that my colleague Elise Labott did about you. And in that, she reported that you were under consideration to become President Trump's Secretary of State after the election. But you said no, because you felt at the time, as governor of South Carolina, you didn't have enough foreign policy experience. Would you give the same answer today if asked to be Secretary of State?
Well, I'm not going to be asked because Rex Tillerson is not going anywhere. You know, at the time that I went to Trump Tower, they were asking me to come there to talk about Secretary of State, and I just knew at that time he could find someone better, and so I took myself out of the running. And I will tell you now that Secretary Tillerson continues to work hard. He's not going anywhere, and I continue to work well with him, so we're going to keep doing it that way.
If he does go somewhere, would you want the job?
He's not going anywhere, so I'm not going to think about it.
Okay. Ambassador Haley, thank you so much for your time this morning. Appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, Dana.